Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation as part of the Industry Insight webinar series. The topic this time is Fighting the Battle of Accepting Credit Cards. Speaking today will be Erica Bursler of CosmoLex and Janelle Benefield of LawPay. Erica Bursler is the Director of Strategic Communications at CosmoLex, developers of an all-in-one cloud-based legal practice management, billing, and trust accounting system specifically designed for solo and small law firms. Erica's degree is in business administration, and she has over 6 years of experience in the legal software industry, catering to the specialized technology needs of small to mid-sized law firms. Erica has given numerous presentations across the country on legal technologies such as law practice technology management, cloud computing, legal billing, and trust accounting compliance. Janelle Benefield is a certified payment specialist and the Director of Client Success at LawPay Credit Card Processing. Janelle is tasked with maintaining high-quality customer service experience for new and existing clients. Her role is focused on customer communication strategies, ensuring that all clients are met in a friendly, timely, and professional manner. The presentation today will be followed by a Q&A. Please enter your questions into the question box in the webinar panel on the right side of your screen. All questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. We are recording this webinar and we will be sending a video and a follow-up email in a few days. We'll also post the video on our blog at www.lawtechnologytoday.org. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Great, thank you so much. So as discussed, today's topic is fighting the battle of accepting credit cards. So to kind of walk through our agenda of what we'll be talking about today, first off, we'll talk about why should you consider accepting credit cards in your law firm if you're not already. We have, individual clients you may have, business clients, they all want to pay by credit card today. So we'll talk about some of those benefits as well. Facing the top 5 challenges. We'll also talk about some of the challenges that can arise when you're managing your credit card payments. It is a very beneficial process, but you do want to be aware of what to keep in mind when you're setting up your acceptance of credit cards. And then also, how can technology help, especially to win the battle? There are a lot of amazing technology that can really simplify this entire process. And in particular, LawPay and CosmoLex have a proven relationship that does give attorneys an end-to-end solution that automates the entire process. So we will be using both tools today just to demonstrate how to overcome the different challenges. And lastly, as Austin said, we have a Q&A. We'll be happy to take any questions at the very end of the webinar. We'll be happy to address those. Okay, so first off is a little chart here that kind of outlines the acceptance of credit card, debit cards, and also checks over the past many years. And today, how we pay our bills as consumers has really changed quite a bit. And when we talk about credit cards in general, we talk about credit card processing, we're actually talking about both debit and credit card. They're kind of lumped together in that convenience processing. And a little ways back in about 2004, that was the first time where debit card actually, the usage of that exceeded credit card usage. And as you could see in the chart here, both of them have been going up quite a bit ever since, especially the debit cards. So the use of debit cards and check cards has actually changed the way we pay our bills, because most of us are not cutting checks anymore. We're not sending them out in the mail. We're paying online or over the phone, and that could be by either credit card or by a debit card. And that's mainly the item we'll be focusing on today. So let's talk a little bit about why you and your clients might prefer handling transactions online or through credit cards. Well, for your clients, it is a quick and easy way to make a payment. They can pay online at any time. They don't have to be in your office. They don't have to call you on the phone, something they can literally do at 2 o'clock in the morning in front of their computer if they choose to. They can also be mindful of their own cash flow. They may pay their credit card 30 days from now. It gives them a little bit of a buffer time as opposed to paying you right up front with cash. And then they may have rewards or miles for their purchases or certain types of points that they may want to accumulate. Therefore, they're more encouraged to use credit cards for all types of purchases. But this is not just a convenience for your clients. It is also a convenience for your firm in general. A few reasons why is you will be receiving payments quicker. Also, of course, expanding your customer base perhaps. You may be turning away customers currently who only want to accept credit cards, and let's say, or pay with credit cards, and let's say you're not currently accepting. Less trips to the bank, the less you have to worry about depositing checks, or the more that decreases, you'll less trips you have to actually make. And then overall, a combination of getting paid quicker and your increased clientele, you'll have overall about 30 to 40% improvement in your cash flow. Getting paid that much more quickly by that many more clients will put you in a much better position. And this applies to, as I said, debit or credit cards, and also online or in your office. So your client can also come to the office with a credit card and be processed that way as well. So a lot of this comes down to quicker payments. So let's talk a little bit about that. Most attorneys don't like to talk about their billing process and their collection rate and how many overdue clients they have or how many invoices they've had to waive, but it is vital to the success of your firm. You want to receive that payment as promptly as possible. And this graph shows results of a survey taken back in 2015. And they asked attorneys if they ever encounter past due clients. And if you notice here, 20% answered either always or most of the time, which is a pretty large percentage there. Another 53% answered that they run into this sometimes. So that is over 70% that say, yep, I do encounter past due clients. So if you do fall into any of these categories, it really is a great opportunity to try out new collection and billing tools that can really improve your collection rate overall. And very often when you're offering an alternative payment or multiple payment methods, or maybe even sending follow-up emails on your invoices, or perhaps having a collection process in place, all of that can be very effective for you in terms of maintaining that collection. And that process itself, especially when you talk about collections, usually the reason why it falls apart or is not done is because it's not streamlined. It can be very cumbersome if not set up properly. So utilizing tools to make that a simple, easy process to get those payments in quicker will just benefit your firm all around. And one other point to make is when we talk about payments and receiving them either online or by credit card, we're not just talking about your invoice payments. There are other ways you receive funds into the office that you may want to consider using credit cards. First would be initial trust retainers that are paid by credit card, either in-house in the office or online. You could request those as well. Also for replenishment of certain retainers. You may have fee prepayments. If your state allows operating retainers, you can accept those as well. And with any type of retainer that you're talking about, you do have a very similar process. You need to either present your client with a bill for the retainer, or maybe you're sending an email request for retainer replenishment. The client can either give you a credit card to swipe, or they can pay online through an online payment link, which is the ultimate convenience for them, of course. And then that has to be deposited into the appropriate account, and then you have to be able to do the back-end bookkeeping part of that. So the process itself is fairly standard, but it gives you a few options in terms of having your clients pay in different methods and getting that money as soon as possible, whether it's retainer or for invoice. And very easily, you can get payments for any of these types of funds overnight, over the weekends, right away, and that could definitely change your cash flow position. So you may be thinking, well, this all sounds great. Why are we having this webinar? Why is there a battle, or why would this even be considered a struggle? Everything is fairly straightforward and obviously beneficial to your client, also beneficial to the firm. And the benefits are still there. Those are still great reasons to start accepting or continue to accept credit cards in your firm. But there can be some challenges that can come about if you're not doing your research when deciding how to set up your credit card processing. There are a lot of banks or even vendors that are offer credit card services, processing, and a lot of times you may just look at the price and say, oh, it's just the fees that they're charging. I'm going to compare them that way. But there is actually a lot more than just that to think about, and we'll talk in more detail with that. Also, how do these services work with your internal setup for your billing or your accounting? So that's what we'll be going a little further into, reviewing the top 5 challenges in these particular areas, but also how technology can help to resolve those and really simplify the entire payment process for yourself. And we'll be giving you a little bit of an example of that towards the end. So the first thing we're going to focus on is merchant providers. So when you're looking to begin accepting credit cards, or even if you're currently accepting and you want to kind of reevaluate your current process, one of the first steps is to choose a merchant provider, which is basically the company that will process your credit card payments. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Janelle, who's going to explain some of the challenges, but also what's most important to focus on when choosing a merchant provider. Janelle?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Erica. So where we're going to start, of course, is challenge number 1, the proper handling of the trust account. And so as our chart earlier shows, it doesn't look like check writing is going to make a comeback anytime soon. And so debit and credit cards are definitely here to stay. And so firms are really starting to think about changing the way they view payment processing and also electronic invoicing there in their firms. And so many law firms today are still not accepting electronic payments at all, or they set it up and have it in place for, maybe just 1 or 2 particular clients, but they don't actually market the service and they don't utilize it to its full benefit for the firm. And so modern law firms today are really starting to learn how to use payments to their advantage and, take it to the next level so that they can be receiving payments in quicker. So what we're going to start with, of course, we're going to start with an education of how payments work behind the scenes. So this will help you to select the best provider for your firm. Our first challenge that we're going to cover is the handling of the trust payments, both by debit and credit card. And you want to ensure that you're working with a provider who knows, kind of step 1, what is a trust or a retainer payment? So, if you have to explain that to them, you're probably off to a little bit of a rocky start. So that's a good, step 1 is that they understand a retainer payment. So here we're starting with the obvious scenario. Most firms have a specific client request to pay by credit card, and they jump through hoops trying to get it set up, get it in place quickly, get that first payment in the door. And they're trying to accommodate that client. In their rush to get money in the door, they put a program in place without really asking enough questions. And so, I want to explain that the most common way that processing companies collect their fees is they debit money out of the bank account where they make the deposits. And the main reason that the banks do that is because they know there's money in that account. That's where they're putting the money. And so that's, pretty common sense. And so that's the basic or, kind of the generic setup. So when you begin accepting trust payments, you don't want a standard account. You don't want them to handle deposits and fees in that way because your trust money needs to be protected and safeguarded. So it's really important to ask questions about how the fees will be withdrawn before you sign on the dotted line. Perfect. You also need to understand when the fees are taken. That's another big component. Another situation you need to avoid is the credit card fees being deducted out of the deposit prior to the funds going into the trust account. And, this is another case where the way the funds are handled, the way the fees are taken, it actually puts your trust account at risk. And so if you run a $5,000 retainer payment in our example, and the fees are taken out prior to the deposit being made, you may see a net deposit going into your trust account of $4,850. And you may be scrambling and looking around saying, where's my $5,000? Call your processing provider and they'll say, oh, we took our fees out before we made the deposit. So you've gotten all your money. Well, now in essence, you've paid your operating expenses out of that trust or that retainer payment. And so it's important for you to understand not only which account are they going to be deducting the funds from, but also when are they going to take their fees, and just really understand the how and when of that process so that you're prepared for, how they're going to be handling the money. So take a quick look at challenge number 2, which is being aware of hold policies. There are a lot of, credit card processing providers out there today. There's a lot more awareness about taking electronic payments than we've ever seen before, because more people are using it. And so, one thing to be aware of is that processing banks are watching the transactions that are going through the network. And at the end of the day, Visa and MasterCard is just a big computer network. It's extremely convenient and we all use it, but it's also being used at times fraudulently, or people are misusing the network. And I'm sure talking to attorneys, you understand that people do make bad choices and commit fraud and things of that nature. And so the networks are being monitored and the banks are looking for activity that seems strange or that is different than the norm. And so, just being aware that that could be an issue with your account. Most large banks are used to handling payments for retail businesses or for restaurants. In that situation, they may have a ticket size for dinner of $50 or $60, very small dollar amount, and they take a lot of transactions. Attorneys are actually very different, and law firms who are taking trust or retainer payments on debit and credit cards, they'll see varying amounts from 5,000, 10,000, or 25,000. So you'll see very big dollar amounts, and it's very unpredictable because the case is very unpredictable. You don't know one case from another. They're not cookie cutter. They're not the same. And so a $60 restaurant ticket and these transactions, those are very common. The banks are used to seeing them. A $25,000 payment, that may raise some flags. That would get the bank's attention and they may start asking some questions. Was this a mistake? Is usually one of the first questions. Was it a typo error? Did somebody mean to type in $2,500 and they typed in 25,000? And I mean, we've certainly seen that happen before. But if this is a legitimate charge, you really don't have time to have it on hold or be, going through that process with the bank, and also meanwhile needing to represent your client. So, you want to have flexibility in your account that you can take those large retainers, you can take those bigger payments, and that your provider understands that kind of processing. And we'll move on into challenge number 3, which is depositing all your funds into one account. Maybe an attorney has decided to offer debit and credit cards, but doesn't want to deal with any trust account issues. Like, what, we're going to draw the line in the sand. We're not going to take any payments into the trust account. And so he or she decides to deposit only into the operating account for funds that are already earned. Well, inevitably, you would run into a scenario where a client comes in and they insist on paying by a debit card or a credit card, and they want to put that retainer payment on that card. And so we're hearing that scenario happen more and more. And so, the attorney may say, okay, I want to take this business. We think it's a good case. Let's go ahead and process the payment. We're going to put that trust retainer payment into our operating account. And then we're going to go in once we receive the money and we're going to move it around. And we're going to manually transfer the funds and we'll do some things behind the scenes. And so, this adds additional steps to the process. It definitely brings in an opportunity for mistakes to be made. And it creates kind of duct taped or patched together accounting for the firm. And so, again, trying to accommodate a client request, now the firm is doing something that, takes more steps and could be prone to error to handle that payment. So at this stage, after my slides, you may be asking yourselves, do any merchant providers get lawyers, and does anybody really do it right? And I would say that, we at LawPay, we like to believe that we do. We understand attorneys and we get it right. you know, our program, we've been working with attorneys for the last 12 years. And so our program continues to grow, be refined, and be improved. And we continue to pursue technology to help attorneys use these modern payment tools, move away from using credit card machines, and having the box underneath your desk, to going online and offering more convenient payment options that your clients are actually more likely to use. And so our program today supports 40,000 attorneys across the country and is recommended by 47 out of the 50 state bar associations. We also work with many metro bars and county bars, and we're recognized through the ABA Advantage program. And so, we love working with attorneys. We cater to attorneys. And so that's really what our program is all about. Now, some of the benefits of LawPay is we've actually heard of the term trust or retainer, and we know what that means. And everyone on our staff understands that terminology and why it's important to attorneys. We have live support, meaning we have people that are going to answer the phone. And if you have questions about using something online or a question about a payment and your money, you're going to have someone that you can call and you can talk to. We also encourage online payment, cloud-based kinds of processing. And that leads me into integrations that we have with companies like CosmoLex, a direct integration with practice management, electronic billing software that gives you the best of both worlds. You can start to modernize your firm, prepare electronic invoices fairly easily, and be able to get those out the door with payment links so that your clients can click a link and make a payment. And, they don't have to work or think about it, call your office between 8 to 5. They can do it anytime when it's convenient for them. And so with that, I'll go ahead and end my section, and I'll pass it back to you, Erica.
Great, thank you so much, Janelle. So Janelle did a great job at covering some of the challenges when looking at a merchant provider or comparing your current provider with the others that may be out there. So let's assume that you've now chosen a provider and you're ready to start accepting credit cards. It's not just about sending a link or entering our credit card number, which of course is a key part in the process. But once that payment's received, you got to worry about daily bookkeeping needs. How do you make sure that the items are tracked properly, and how do you make sure the proper entries are being made? So we're going to add on a few more challenges that take into account how to manage those back-end entries. So the fourth challenge we're going to talk about is the billing and accounting gap. Now, most law firm billing systems do not include accounting. Usually for accounting, you're using a separate system, maybe like QuickBooks or some other general accounting system. Usually, that's the typical case. And the separation of the accounting from the billing and also practice management and all that, that does create quite a bit of a gap, especially between the billing and accounting when you're talking about credit card processing. And it's important to note that gap when considering to accept credit cards. Your billing system usually has the client invoice amounts and the actual bills themselves, but your accounting software receives the credit card deposit. So daily, you're going to have to reconcile between the two and possibly increase the risk of input errors because you'll be entering data in two locations. Some other items related to the billing and accounting gap. How will your accounting system know which invoice is paid? One of the best parts about credit card payments is the money just literally shows up in your bank account. And that's an accounting function. It shows up in your operating account overnight, which is great. However, even if that money is recorded in the accounting system, it still doesn't know what invoice that is for because your systems are separated out. When you're dealing with check payments, that's handled by making duplicate entries. You'll enter the check in your billing system and enter the check in your accounting system. But when the transaction just shows up and that deposit's just there, how are you going to account for that? Another point is how are you going to manage credit card batching? So to help with identifying which payments go to what invoices, it is suggested that you batch your credit card payments. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And also, how will you handle disputes or chargebacks? This is not like a check, which you can just either return or void or choose not to deposit. With a credit card payment, the charge is made in real time. especially if that payment is linked to your billing. How do you process that, and how do you account for that in your records accurately? So the first example is credit card batching. So what happens is when the credit card company deposits funds into your bank for usually payments charged to your office or to your client that come into your office, it's commingled with other payments made by other clients in one deposit. And this kind of explains how that would be laid out. For instance, I have here one client paid by American Express for $200, but my client B, C, and D all paid by Visa MasterCard. So you'll notice that in the bank, I'm going to receive a $200 deposit from Amex, which is fairly straightforward. But from Visa MasterCard, I get a $1,200 deposit. How do I know which clients those are for and which invoices those are for? And this is not a one-time task, reconciling between your billing and your accounting. This will happen each and every day you receive payments. But I know that may seem a bit daunting, that may seem like a lot of work, but again, technology can really help a lot to streamline this whole process, and I'll give you an example in a moment. Also, when you're dealing with voids or refunds, and also chargebacks, the difference between the two. So a void would be, let's say your office is refunding the money. Maybe there's a mistake that was made and you need to recharge the correct amount. If it's done in the same day, then usually they kind of cancel each other out because it's not yet fully processed. But in a different day, you might have money going in one day and out the next. So again, the accounting for that has to be accurate. Chargebacks is more so when a client disputes a charge, and if for some reason you can't overcome that dispute, then the money will be automatically taken out of the account. So that can happen, you might be aware it's coming up, but it can happen today, and the only way you'll know is if you're looking at your operating account. So either way, again, how would your billing and accounting systems, which are separate from each other, keep track of everything? And that actually takes us to our last item. Our final challenge is complexities that can occur when your payment processing is not integrated with your practice management. And believe it or not, this is something that we've, here at CosmoLex, we work with LawPay, and we've learned over time how complicated it can be when your payment processing is separate from your billing and your accounting, even more so when your billing and your accounting are separate. So bringing all of that together can have a lot of benefits. So first is to talk about what is that credit card payment cycle. Well, first your client has to pay online. They need to maybe click online or go in your office and give you a credit card payment. Then the payment is processed by your merchant provider. They need to receive that payment on their end, process it through the system. But also, an entry has to be made into your billing system to confirm if that invoice is paid, maybe partial or full. Maybe you received a retainer, so what's the new retainer balance, and for who is that payment for? And also you have accounting entries have to be made. Did you receive income? Were your expenses reimbursed? Is this a retainer? That needs to be accounted for accounting purposes to affect your profit and loss, your balance sheet, and your other accounting reporting. So when you have your payment processing completely separate from your billing and also completely separate from your accounting, then these end up becoming multiple manual entries. And some of you may be doing that type of process currently. And not only is that time consuming, of course, but your accuracy can be greatly affected. And it may make you feel like, oh, accepting credit cards is such a pain. I have all this work to do. But when you integrate the three, the cycle becomes fully automated and you're not having to do any of those back-end entries. And that's exactly what we want to go about giving you an idea of how that works today. So some overall benefits of integration, of course, you'll get faster online payments, send an invoice with a link, share it in a client portal, they can click on it, pay, be done. You eliminate any back office manual entry. So think of when you receive a check, you have to then enter that information somewhere in your, usually as a, let's say it's for an invoice payment in your billing system and an income payment into your accounting system. But with credit cards, that information is already captured, and especially if your billing and accounting are together, that all happens at the same time. You need to ensure all payments get captured on a matter level. If your merchant provider integrates with your billing system, then that is linked directly to your matter. Of course, that would have to be some sort of legal specific solution or something set up for matters. And then you automate your billing and accounting entries. You could really take this a step further if you have a system, a practice management system that integrates accounting and billing, so that when that payment comes in from the merchant provider, the entries are being made not only for the billing, but also for the accounting as well. And it sounds kind of great. You know, you're taking all these complicated steps and really automating it and making the back end part really disappear and not have to be any additional administrative work that you or your firm needs to do. So with that, I'd like to talk a little bit about how that gets automated. So CosmoLex and LawPay have come together to provide you with CosmoPay, which is really a unique solution of not only processing your payments, but making sure all of your billing and accounting entries are captured accurately and without any manual work, because that not only takes time, but it can affect the accuracy of your billing and accounting. And one of the main reasons that CosmoLex enabled this type of solution is that we are a system that has that fully integrated billing, accounting, and practice management as well. And with LawPay, of course, they work specifically with attorneys. So it was an excellent match, especially from the trust accounting standpoint, as to why we work together. But I do want to say that at the end of the day, no matter what tools or services that you use, even if you currently have a setup, the key is you want to ensure that your workflow is simplified and as accurate as possible. You are responsible to make sure that your trust account is being handled properly and that you're recording your income properly at end of year for your firm. So with keeping those things in mind, at the end of the day, you're running a business, you're running a firm, you need to be concerned about your compliance. You want to make sure whatever setup you have meets those needs. And when you use legal specific tools, very often that kind of comes with it. So I will just take a couple of minutes just to give you an overview of how technology can really help to simplify this entire process. So I'm jumping into the CosmoLex software, and if I go into my setup area, you will see that I have an integration with LawPay turned on. So for that reason, I can go ahead and start accepting credit cards in my system. So let's walk through a couple of examples of transactions and processing that might take place. So let's say I need to request a trust retainer, or I could do it in the office too. So let me locate, I actually have a specific matter right here that I want to go ahead and receive some funds. Now, this is for trust funds. I can click on trust transaction. I can say this is a deposit and charge credit card. Let's say I want to get $1,000 from Lee, and she gave me the credit card in office. I either have an authorization form or she's physically sitting in front of me with her credit card. I can go ahead and click save, and this will pop up for credit card information. So I can enter that. I can go ahead and complete this information. And at the very end, what's going to happen is not only is her card going to be charged, but her balance has then been updated by that $1,000. And at the same time, a liability entry has been made for my accounting records. So again, credit card processing feeds into the trust accounting, feeds into your records and your business accounting as well. Another way is online. Maybe I want to request a trust retainer payment online. I can go ahead and say, you know what, I need $1,000 from you, Lee. When I go ahead and send that, it's actually going to send an email to her stating that we need a certain amount of trust retainer, including a payment link. And that payment link she can click on and go ahead and enter the information online. And that, again, will communicate back to my CosmoLex and update the trust retainer balance and also enter as a liability to the firm. So again, it's multiple things happening at once. Another common example is invoice payments. So let's say I wanted to pay a particular invoice. So I happen to have a balance here. I'll go within that matter. And I have an invoice. So I have an invoice for $280. Now I can process that credit card in office as well, or I'll email it to the client. And I'm going to show you what it looks like when you email it. So they're going to get a PDF. And here is my PDF copy of my invoice. So I'm your client, and there is a link right at the top. So with this link, I can actually click on it as your client, and I'll be brought to a site that has your header up at the top with your contact information, the exact amount of that invoice, and the ability for them to enter their credit card information. So let me just enter that here as well. And I'm going to submit that payment. Okay, great. So I've paid that. So as a client, I'm like, awesome. I just processed that payment. One other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my invoice tab. This invoice went away because it's underpaid. So not only did LawPay process that payment for your client, it has marked this invoice as paid, updated the balance, and if I go into the transactions, you will see, let me just make sure by date, we have that $280 payment right here. And it was paid by credit card. So all that information is captured for you. The invoice payment is also allocated. So that's how you're taking things to the next level. I'm not just processing a payment, I'm also doing the accounting entries as well. And one last point to bring up is, of course, you need to process your voids and whatnot. So if I needed to void a particular transaction or refund it, I could absolutely do that directly from here. And I can batch those credit card payments. So if I have a particular account, let me go to my banks. This is my credit card account. I can create a batch and say, you know what? I received X amount of credit card payments today. I can batch them all together. And that way, when I get a deposit for $11.50 into my bank, it all makes sense. I'll know exactly what payments those were for, and I'll have a complete record and be able to reconcile smoothly. So that in general, just to give you kind of an overview of how a lot of those challenges can be resolved with technology and how some thought should be put into the types of tools that you use to really simplify this whole process. Because as Janelle said, credit cards are not going away anytime soon. Checks may be going away sometime soon, and we need to kind of adjust with that in order to receive timely payments in your firm.